What if the greatest spiritual danger of our time isn't hate, violence, or even open disbelief, but a form of love that lives without God and justifies itself every single day? What if there are thousands of souls right now convinced they're doing the right thing while slowly fading away? Padre Pio revealed something most people don't want to hear because it doesn't attack the world from outside, but from within the home, from the shared bed. From the intimacy that looks like love, but spiritually can become a silent wound. Listen, Padre Pio didn't speak from theories. He spoke from what he saw, from what was shown to him when a soul knelt before him, believing they were confessing something normal, something understandable, something God surely gets. He would look up, stay silent, and many times cry before speaking, because what he saw wasn't just a sin, but a deep confusion of the soul that had learned to live with the absence of grace, as if it were normal. If this message stirs something in your heart, write in the comments, "Lord, I want to put my life in order," not as some magic formula, but as an act of truth. Your words matter, and they help this message reach others who need to hear it. The saints said there are relationships that seem peaceful on the outside, but inside they're spiritually unprotected. Two people who love each other, who work, who build a life together, but who have decided to skip the altar, the sacrament, the total surrender to God. And that decision, even though the world celebrates it as maturity or freedom, leaves the soul in a kind of no man's land. It's not open rejection of God, but it's not obedience either. It's a suspended life. What I'm about to share with you today is something Padre Pio saw repeatedly in the confessional. Something that made him weep. Something that reveals what truly happens to the soul when two people live as if married, without God's blessing. And I promise you, by the end of this video, you'll understand why this matters more than you ever imagined. Stay with me. Padre didn't have ordinary vision. When somebody approached his confessional, he didn't just hear their words. He saw their soul. He saw the weight they carried, the compromises they'd made, the little deaths they'd accepted as normal. And one of the things that grieved him most deeply wasn't the dramatic sins, the public scandals, or the obvious rebellions. It was something quieter, something the world had learned to call by softer names. He called it living in spiritual disorder, not chaos, not destruction, but disorder, like a room where everything is slightly out of place. You can still function in it, still move around, still convince yourself it's fine, but deep down something feels off, and the soul, he observed, never stops feeling that wrongness, even when the mind gets really good at explaining it away. There's a story told by one of his spiritual children about a woman who came to confession and started with confidence. "Father, I don't have any big sins." Padre Pio didn't interrupt. He let her talk. She explained that she lived with her partner, that they loved each other, that they weren't hurting anyone, that someday they'd get married. When she finished, there was a long silence. Then the saint said with a voice that was firm but wounded, "My daughter, your soul is tired of receiving without having been consecrated." The woman trembled. No one had ever spoken to her like that, and she began to cry. You see, he understood something we've forgotten. When you live as if married without being married before God, the body gets ahead of the soul. You take an intimacy that's reserved for a sacred covenant, and the soul, which was created for order, for truth, for fullness, is forced to adapt to a pious lie because that's what hurts the most. It's not open rebellion. It's a gentle lie repeated every night. Marriage in His teaching isn't a piece of paper or a party. It's a spiritual shield. It's a concrete grace that protects human love from the erosion of sin, from selfishness, from exhaustion. When that grace isn't there, love is exposed and the enemy doesn't enter with violence. He enters through small cracks, comparisons, suspicions, coldness, outside temptations, lack of shared prayer. Nothing explodes. Suddenly, just slowly dries up. The saint saw clearly that the soul doesn't get used to disorder without paying a price. At first, you don't notice it. Everything seems the same. You pray less, but you still believe. You avoid confession, but you still say, God knows. You stop taking communion, but you keep the image of being a good person. And little by little, the soul learns to live without the sacraments, as if it didn't need them. That's the real danger. Not the scandal, but the spiritual anesthesia. He warned about something almost no one preaches today. That many relationship crises don't begin in psychology, but in spirituality. They begin the day God stops being the center and becomes a distant spectator. When you decide, first we'll figure out our stuff, then we'll deal with God. But God doesn't bless what's given to him halfway. Padre Pio wasn't trying to shame Anion. He was trying to wake them up. He saw that when people live in this situation, they lose their interior peace. They sleep, but they don't rest. They have companionship, but they feel alone. They have affection, but they feel an emptiness they can't explain. And they look for answers in everything except the spiritual root of the problem. As he once said, the soul canows when something isn't in its place, even when the mind justifies it. And yet he never closed the door. Heaven doesn't get offended. It waits. But time isn't neutral. Every year lived outside, sacramental order makes the step toward conversion heavier, more elaborate. Excuses appear. Fear of what people will say appears. The pride of thinking we're fine just like this appears. And meanwhile the soul keeps thirsting. What he witnessed was this: a kind of love that looks real, feels real, but is spiritually incomplete. Not because the feelings are fake, but because they're being lived in a space that God hasn't blessed yet. And without that blessing, without that grace, love has to survive on its own strength. And human strength alone was never meant to carry the weight of lifelong commitment. Brothers and sisters, if this message is touching your heart, I want to share something with you that's helped thousands of people deepen their walk with God. It's called The Spiritual Secrets of Saint Padre Pio. Think about it. You're here because something in these teachings resonates with you. You're searching for something deeper, something that brings real peace. This material was created exactly for that. Inside you'll find powerful prayers that Padre Pio himself used, deep reflections that cut through the noise of daily life, and practical guidance for living authentic spirituality. You'll also discover real stories of miracles and conversions that strengthen faith when it feels weak, and restore hope when everything seems dark, and bring peace to hearts that have been restless for years. The saint taught that a faith lived with sincerity can transform everything. This ebook is your invitation to take that concrete step. The link to access it is pinned in the comments. Now let me show you the price. The soul pays in silence. The spiritual damage doesn't announce itself with thunder and lightning. It creeps in like fog, slow, silent, almost invisible. You wake up one day and realize you haven't prayed together in months. You can't remember the last time you went to Mass without feeling like a stranger. Confession feels impossible because you'd have to confess the very foundation of your life together. And so you just stop going. The saint taught that the soul doesn't adjust to disorder without bleeding internally. At first, the bleeding is so small, you convince yourself it's not there. You tell yourself, we're good people, we love each other, we're not hurting anyone. And technically that might all be true. Well, but you can be good people living in spiritual danger at the same time. Think about it like this. Imagine trying to build a house without a foundation. You can put up walls, paint them beautiful colors, fill the rooms with furniture and laughter. From the outside, it looks like a home. But the first real storm that comes will show you what's missing. And relationships face storms, financial pressure, health crisis, family conflicts, temptations from outside. When those storms hit, a relationship without sacramental grace has nowhere to anchor. It just sways in the wind, hoping to survive on feelings alone. Padre Pio witnessed this pattern over and over. Couples would come to him years into their relationship confused about why things felt so heavy, why the fights got meaner, why the affection felt more like routine than connection, why they looked at each other sometimes and felt like strangers. And he would ask them gently, when did you stop praying together? When did God become optional in your home? The answer was always the same. We still believe. Well, Father, we just got busy. We'll get back to it. But that's the trap. You don't get back to it when you're living in a structure that excludes God from the center. You can't add him as a side feature later. He either blesses the union from the beginning or the union tries to survive on human effort alone. And human effort, no matter how sincere, runs out. The saint used to say something that sounds harsh but is actually deeply loving. I cannot heal a wound that the soul refuses to stop opening. He wasn't being cruel. He was being a spiritual doctor. If someone keeps cutting themselves and then asks for healing while holding the knife, what can you do? The healing can't happen until the cutting stops. And this is where it gets really personal, because the world has told us that commitment without God is mature, evolved, modern, that getting married is just a formality you do when it's convenient, that living together first is smart, practical, responsible even. But Padre Pio saw what that wisdom does to the soul. He saw how it trains people to take without consecrating, to consume intimacy, without surrendering to sacrifice, to enjoy the benefits of marriage without accepting the cross that makes it holy. He taught that when a couple finally decides to order their lives, when they choose to marry sacramentally after years of living together, something shifts, not just legally or socially, but spiritually. The grace that was being blocked suddenly flows. The protection that was missing suddenly surrounds them. It doesn't fix everything instantly, but it changes the playing field. Now they're not fighting alone anymore. Now they have heaven backing them up. But he also warned that no love is destroyed by waiting for God. But many loves are destroyed by excluding him. The world teaches you to test everything before committing. God teaches you to commit so that love can mature. These are opposite logics for us. And the soul feels the difference even when the mind argues otherwise. Now we need to talk about symptoms that show up in your everyday life, but nobody connects them to the spiritual root. You just think you're stressed, tired, going through a phase. But Padre Pio would look at these exact symptoms and see something deeper. He'd see a soul starving for grace while the mind keeps insisting everything's fine. People in this situation will often say they feel restless for no reason. They have everything they thought they wanted, a partner who loves them, a home, plans for the future. But at night, when it's quiet, there's this gnawing feeling that something's off. They scroll their phones to avoid it, turn on another show, stay busy, anything to not sit with that feeling. Because if they actually sit with it, they might have to admit what it is. It's the soul whispering, "This isn't how it's supposed to be." The saint knew the soul has its own language. It speaks through unease, through restlessness, through that quiet voice you keep dismissing as anxiety. But it's not anxiety. It's awareness. The soul knows it's living in a structure that hasn't been blessed. It canals it's taking from a well it hasn't consecrated. And no amount of mental gymnastics can silence that knowing completely. Another sign he noticed, couples in this situation often struggle to pray together. They might pray alone. You might still go to church occasionally, but praying together as a couple feels awkward, forced, or just never happens. And there's a reason for that. Prayer requires honesty before God. And when your whole living situation is something you're either justifying or avoiding mentioning to God, prayer becomes uncomfortable. So you just don't do it. And slowly God becomes the elephant in the room of your own relationship. Padre Pio also observed how this affects trust in unexpected ways. You'd think it wouldn't matter, right? You love each other. You're committed in your hearts, so trust should be solid. But he noticed that couples living this way often deal with deeper insecurities. Little jealousies, checking phones, wondering where the other person really is. It's not that they're bad people. It's that when the foundation isn't sacred, everything built on it feels a bit shaky. There's no covenant binding you before God, just feelings and promises that can technically be broken any time. And the soul knows that even if you never say it out loud. And then there's the confession issue. This is Hudge. The saint encountered countless people who hadn't been to confession in years, specifically because they knew they'd have to address this. They'd have to either lie to the priest or admit what they're doing. And neither option feels doable. So they just avoid the sacrament altogether. And that might seem like no big deal at first, but confession is where spiritual healing happens. It's where you unload the weight you're carrying. Without it, that weight just keeps accumulating year after year until your soul is bent under the burden of carrying what was never meant to be carried alone. There were times when Padre Pio would refuse absolution, not because he was harsh, but because he loved people too much to give them false peace. He'd say, "I cannot absolve what you're planning to continue doing tomorrow." And people would get upset. They'd say, "But, Father, we love each other. Doesn't that count for something?" And he'd respond, "Love counts for everything. That's exactly why it needs to be protected by grace, not just by feelings." This wasn't cruelty. This was a spiritual surgeon, refusing to put a band-aid on a wound that needs stitches. He knew that if he gave cheap absolution, people would walk away thinking they were fine when they weren't. They'd keep living the same way, keep drifting further from the sacraments, keep losing the spiritual protection they desperately needed. But listen to this. The saint never said you have to stop loving each other. He said, you have to stop loving each other in disorder. There's a massive difference. One asks you to give up the person. The other asks you to give up the structure. That's harming both of you spiritually. And yes, that might mean sacrifice. It might mean living separately until you can marry. It might mean facing family, judgment, or financial difficulty. But he will always say, what does it profit you to keep your comfort but lose your peace? The truth is, the soul will never be at rest in a situation that contradicts its design. You can justify it philosophically, culturally, practically, but you can't convince your soul that disorder is order. And that's the battle people are fighting. Not with the world, not with the church, but with themselves, with the part of them that knows better, even when they desperately wish it didn't. Now, this is the part that brings hope, because Padre Pio never left anyone in despair. When he saw humility, when he saw a genuine desire to change, his whole face would transform. He'd go from stern spiritual father to the most tender guide you could imagine. He'd say, "The door is open. Heaven has been waiting for you." He gave very specific steps for couples who wanted to order their lives. First, confession, deep, honest confession, where you stop defending yourself and just tell the truth. No sugarcoating. "No, but we really love each other." Justifications. "Ain't just, Father. I've been living outside God's design, and I want to come back." Second, the rosary daily, especially asking the Blessed Mother for help, because she teaches how to love with purity and obedience. She knows what it means to say yes to God even when it costs you everything. And for couples trying to reorder their lives, that yes can feel like it costs everything. Third, blessed water in the home, because the home needs to be reclaimed for God. It needs to stop being a space where disorder is normalized and start being a space where grace can dwell. And fourth, when possible, marriage without unnecessary delay, not a huge expensive wedding, if that's not realistic, but the sacrament itself, the covenant, the moment when two people stop living on their own terms and invite God to be the foundation instead of an afterthought. Something the saint taught really stands out. No love is destroyed by waiting for God, but many loves are destroyed by excluding Him. The world tells you to try everything before committing. God tells you to commit so that love can actually mature. These are opposite philosophies, and the soul knows which one leads to life. If you're listening to this and something inside you is stirring, don't ignore it. That's not condemnation. That's a call. When a word hurts but illuminates, according to Padre Pio, it comes from God. And ask yourself honestly, what's happened to my relationship with the sacraments since I started living this way? When was the last time I confessed without fear? When was the last time I prayed with real peace? Today can be the day you start putting things in order. Not everything gets resolved instantly, but every conversion begins with an interior decision. Brothers and sisters, what we've just walked through together isn't meant to condemn anyone. It's meant to illuminate a path back to peace. Padre Pio spent his entire life helping souls find their way home to God. And this teaching about living together without sacramental blessing was one he returned to again and again. Not because he was rigid, but because he saw the wounds it created. Think about this for a moment. And every single teaching we've covered today comes down to one simple truth. God isn't interested in making your life harder. He's interested in making your love last. He's interested in protecting what's precious to you. And he knows better than we do that love without His grace is like a plant trying to grow without roots. It might look fine for a season, but it won't survive the drought. The saint repeated this truth over and over throughout his ministry. Heaven rejoices more over one sincere step than over a lifetime of appearances. And God isn't asking you to stop loving. He's asking you to love well, to love with Him, because only that way is love truly saved, truly protected, truly able to become everything it was meant to be. If this message reached deep into your heart today, if something stirred inside you that you've been trying to ignore for months or maybe years, don't push it away. That stirring is grace. That discomfort you're feeling isn't punishment. It's your soul trying to guide you toward healing. I want you to do something right now. Write in the comments, Lord, I want to put my life in order. Say it as a prayer, as a declaration, as the first step of a journey back to peace. And then share this video with someone you love, not to judge them, not to point fingers, but to awaken something in them that might be asleep. Because real love doesn't run from God, it seeks Him. The path forward might not be easy. It might require difficult conversations, uncomfortable changes, sacrifices you didn't want to make. But here's what Padre Pio knew with absolute certainty. Every single person who took that step, who chose to order their lives according to God's design, never regretted it. Not one. They only regretted waiting so long. Your soul is worth fighting for. Your relationship is worth doing right. And God is waiting, not with anger, but with open arms, ready to pour out the grace you've been living without. Don't wait another day. Take the step. Heaven is already celebrating the decision you're about to make. Brothers and sisters, we're building something beautiful here, in a community united in faith and in the teachings of Padre Pio. But we need your help to keep spreading this message. If this video touched your heart, please leave a like, share it with your family and friends, and consider becoming a member of our channel. Together, we can bring more souls closer to God. You're not just supporting a channel, you're part of a mission. Thank you for being